Hey there. Tonight we're going back, way back, to a time before cathedrals pierced the sky, before marble columns lined sacred halls, back to when the most powerful priests in Western Europe, the Druids, looked at the idea of building stone temples and said, "No thanks, we'll worship under the trees instead." You are standing in ancient Gaul, around 300 BCE. You're 16 years old, your name whispered only to those who've earned the right to know it. Your hands are calloused from years of cutting sacred mistletoe. Your feet bare even in winter, and you've just learned something that will define the next 20 years of your training. The Romans build temples. The Greeks build temples. Even the Celts across the Channel are starting to stack stones. But your people? Your people trust the oak, the ash, the yew. And tonight, you're about to discover why. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. So, dim the lights, settle into your bed, and let's walk together through the sacred groves where blood soaked into roots, where knowledge was whispered by leaves, and where you wake before dawn in the roundhouse that has been your home since childhood. The air inside is thick with smoke from the central hearth, which never quite dies even in the depths of night. Your sleeping mat is stuffed with dried heather, and you can feel every stem through the woven wool blanket. Your back aches. It always aches. You're 16, but your body feels older because the training never stops, not even in sleep. The Master Druid says the body must learn to rest while the mind watches. You're not sure if that's wisdom or just an excuse for the terrible betting. Outside, you hear the first birds beginning their morning argument. Blackbirds from the sound of it. Your ears have been trained to distinguish every bird, every rustle, every crack of branch. The natural world is your temple, after all, and you must know its every prayer. You rise slowly, careful not to wake the 3 other initiates who share this space. 2 of them are older than you, already in their 5th year of training. The 3rd is newer, only 13, and he cries sometimes in the night when he thinks no one can hear. You pull on your tunic, undyed wool, rough against your skin, and wrap your cloak around your shoulders. The fabric is damp. Everything is always damp here in the forests of Gaul. You've learned to ignore the sensation of constant moisture, the way it creeps into your bones and makes even summer feel like autumn. You step outside into the pre-dawn darkness, your breath forming clouds in the cold air. The Master Druid is already in the grove when you arrive. He's always already there, as if he sleeps standing among the trees like some ancient oak himself. His name is Divichiakos, which means Divine One, though you only know this because you overheard it once. To his students, he is simply Master. He is old, perhaps 50, perhaps older, with a beard that reaches his chest and hair that is gone entirely silver. His face is a landscape of wrinkles, each line earned through decades of memorization, ritual, and the particular stress that comes from holding your entire culture's knowledge in your mortal skull. He doesn't acknowledge your arrival. That's normal. You take your position at the base of the largest oak, sitting cross-legged on the cold ground, arranging your cloak around you for minimal warmth. 3 other initiates arrive within minutes, taking their own positions. The youngest, Brenos, is shivering. His lips are slightly blue. The Master observes this with the same expression he might give a cloud formation, mildly interested, but not moved to action. "Memory," the Master says, his voice like stones grinding together, "is why we have no temples." This is not the lesson you expected. You were prepared to recite plant names. "Stone," the Master continues, pacing slowly around the circle of students, "is for people who fear forgetting. They carve their prayers into walls because they don't trust their children to remember. They build high so their gods can see them from far away, as if the divine needed height to notice worship. His voice carries contempt, the kind of contempt that comes from deep philosophical conviction rather than mere preference. We do not fear forgetting. We make forgetting impossible. Each of you will memorize 20,000 verses before you're permitted to teach. Every law, every genealogy, every cure, every curse, all of it held here. He taps his temple with one gnarled finger. You feel the weight of those 20,000 verses like a physical burden. You're 6 years into your training, and perhaps a quarter of the way through. The words are stacked in your mind like stones in a cairn, each one placed carefully, each one connected to the next through elaborate memory systems. You dream in verse. You walk in meter. Sometimes you forget what it was like to think in simple, unmemorized thoughts. Stone temples attract attention. Master Diviciakos says, stopping in front of Brenos, the youngest initiate. The boy looks up, trying to hide his shivering. The lesson continues for 2 hours. By the time the master finally dismisses you, the sun has fully risen, and your legs have gone completely numb from sitting. You struggle to your feet, stumbling slightly, catching yourself against the oak's trunk. The bark is rough under your palm, deeply ridged. Alive, you press your forehead against it briefly. A gesture of gratitude taught in your first year. Then begin the slow walk back toward the settlement. Your mind is churning through the implications of this morning's teaching. You've always known that Druids avoid permanent structures, but you'd thought it was purely spiritual, a belief that the divine is in nature, not in buildings. The strategic element, that permanence makes you a target, had never occurred to you. You're simultaneously impressed by the wisdom and troubled by what it means. If your entire culture is designed around staying invisible, what does that say about your people's strength? Or rather, what does it say about the strength of those who hunt you? Breakfast is barley porridge, as expected, served in wooden bowls. You eat standing near the cook fire, warming your hands around the bowl as much as eating. The porridge is thick and unsalted. Your afternoon lesson is in the chieftain's roundhouse, which is twice the size of any other building in the settlement. The interior is dark even at midday, illuminated only by the central hearth and 2 small windows that let in thin shafts of light. The air is thick with smoke that never fully escapes, and your eyes water as you enter. You're here to observe, not participate. The master and 2 other senior druids are meeting with Chieftain Ambiorix to discuss a boundary dispute with a neighboring tribe. You stand in the shadows, silent and still, learning by presence. Ambiorix is a bull of a man, thick-necked and heavy-shouldered, with a beard that's more gold than gray. He wears a tunic dyed in expensive saffron yellow, and gold rings crowd his fingers. His voice is loud, accustomed to being heard over battle and feast alike. They've moved their boundary stones, he's saying, one meaty fist striking his palm for emphasis. 3 fields that my grandfather cleared are suddenly theirs. They claim ancient rights. Master Diviciakos sits on a low stool, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute. Ancient rights. He repeats, his voice neutral. Meaning they say their great-great-grandfather pastured sheep there before anyone cleared the land. They're invoking old law. Pfft, Ambiorix spits into the fire. Old law that no one remembers except Druids. This is why Druids have power that makes even
The claim has no merit, Master Diviciakos says finally, his eyes opening. The boundary was established by Cathbad the Elder in the time of your grandfather's grandfather. I can recite the entire settlement if you wish, including the stone markers, the tree witnesses, and the compensation paid. He pauses, letting the weight of this sink in. No sheep grazing rights were granted.
The neighboring claim is either ignorance or deliberate falsehood. You see relief wash over Ambiorix's face, followed quickly by something harder. Then I may take action. You may defend what is yours under old law, the master confirms. But he holds up one finger and the chieftain stills. 3 fields are not worth 3 deaths. Make your strength known, but do not be foolish. The neighboring tribe has recently traded for iron weapons from the south. Your warriors still carry bronze. This is news to you. You didn't know about the iron weapons. The master continues. In 2 seasons, the traders will come through again. I will ensure you receive first opportunity to purchase iron. Until then, defend through show of force, not actual combat. Move your own boundary stones forward into disputed. The meeting ends and you follow the master outside, blinking in the sudden brightness of afternoon sun. The other 2 senior druids peel away toward their own business, leaving you walking several paces behind Divichiakos as he returns toward the grove. He doesn't speak, and you know better than to initiate conversation. Instead, you process what you witnessed. The master didn't just rule on law. He shaped the chieftain's future actions, prevented a war, and positioned the tribe for a better outcome, all while maintaining the appearance of simply recalling old facts. What did you learn? The master asks, without turning around. You knew this was coming. Every observation session ends with interrogation. That memory is power, you reply, choosing your words carefully. The chieftain had no way to verify the boundary claim. He was dependent on your knowledge. True, but insufficient. What else? You think harder. That druids see further than chieftains. You already knew about the iron weapons. You're planning ahead to the trader season. Better. And this is the hard one. There's always a 3rd layer. You replay the conversation in your mind, searching for what you missed. Then it hits you. You mentioned the Romans again. You're teaching the chieftain that all disputes now are small compared to what's coming. You're trying to unite the tribes before the threat arrives. That evening, after a thin dinner of bread and onions, you sit with the other initiates for evening recitation. This is the part of training that never ends, the constant repetition, the endless memorization. Tonight, it's genealogies. You must recite the lineage of the Aedui tribe going back 12 generations, including all marriages, all notable deeds, all claims to land or cattle or honor. The recitation is communal. One person begins, another continues at a signal, back and forth, testing each other's memory while reinforcing your own. Vercingenos, the oldest initiate at 21, begins. Divisiakos, son of Ambigatos, who ruled in the time of the Great Frost. Ambigatos, son of Segavax, who led the war against the Arverni and claimed the river valley as compensation. The recitation continues, voice after voice picking up the thread. Your mind follows along, checking their accuracy against your own memorization. They're correct so far. The youngest, Brenos, stumbles over a name, Convicto Litavis, and has to start again. No one helps him. Helping is forbidden. You must know it yourself or face punishment. When your turn comes, you speak clearly. Congentiatos, son of Adiana Tunus, who married Litavi of the Senones and brought 300 cattle as bride price. Sleep, when it finally comes, is brief and interrupted. You're woken in the deep night by a hand on your shoulder. The master's voice, "Come. Quietly." You rise immediately, stepping over the sleeping forms of the other initiates, following the silver-haired shadow out into the night. The moon is 3/4 full, bright enough to see by. The air is cold enough to make your breath visible. You follow the master toward the grove.
confused. Nighttime lessons are rare and usually signal something important or dangerous. Your bare feet know the path well enough that you don't stumble. The settlement sleeps behind you. Only a few dogs notice your passage, and they're too familiar with the Druid's odd hours to bother barking. Inside the grove, the moonlight filtering through the oak canopy creates a silver and shadow world. 3 other Druids are already present. Not the ones from the chieftain's meeting, but others you've seen at festivals. They wear their ritual robes, the deep blue appearing almost black in the moonlight. The master gestures for you to sit at the edge of the small clearing. You obey, your heart beating faster. This is not a lesson. This is something else. "You've been chosen," one of the Druids says. You don't recognize him, but his voice carries authority. "In 3 days, representatives from..."
The next 3 days are brutal. You're excused from regular lessons and assigned to intensive memory training with a senior druid named Katurix. He's younger than the master, perhaps 30, and his teaching method is relentless repetition under increasingly difficult conditions. First, he recites a long passage about trade agreements between tribes. You must recite it back. Then he takes you running through the forest, and you must recite while gasping for breath. Then he recites while 3 warriors practice with swords nearby, the clash of metal deliberate distraction, and you must reproduce his words exactly despite the noise. At the Great Grove, there will be arguments, Katurix explains during a brief rest. There will be shouting. There will be warriors posturing and chieftains threatening. You must hear through all of it. Your memory must be perfect even when chaos surrounds you. He's not cruel, but he's exacting. When you make errors, and you make many, he simply makes you repeat the exercise until you succeed. By the 3rd day, you can recite agreements while running, while cold, while exhausted, while men scream insults in your ears. Your mind has been trained to separate essential from noise, to hear words with crystalline clarity regardless of circumstances. You're also learning to recite without emotion, without inflection, so that your delivery cannot be accused of favoring one party over another. Pure memory, pure accuracy, a human record. The evening before the gathering, you wake before dawn on the day of the gathering, your stomach churning with anxiety. The journey to the Great Grove takes half a day on foot. You travel with Master Divichiakos and Katurix, plus 2 warriors who serve as escorts. The path leads deeper into the forest than you've ever ventured, following trails that seem barely visible, but which the Master navigates with absolute certainty. These are the old ways, the hidden paths that connect sacred sites across hundreds of leagues. The forest here is older, darker. The oaks are massive beyond belief, their trunks wider than 3 men standing with arms linked. Moss hangs from branches like the beards of ancient gods. The air itself feels heavier, thick with the accumulated prayers of centuries. You walk in silence, as instructed. This is not a journey for idle talk. You're moving through sacred space, and every step should be taken with awareness. Around midday, you stop at a spring to drink and eat cold provisions. The water is so clear you can count every pebble on the bottom, and so cold it makes your teeth ache. Master Divichiakos kneels and performs a small ritual, leaving a bronze pin as offering. "Everything comes from the earth," he murmurs. "We give back to maintain balance." You watch how he does it, filing away the gesture for future use. As afternoon arrives, you hear them before you see them. Voices, many voices, echoing through the trees. The Great Grove is ahead. Your heart rate increases. You're about to enter a gathering. The Great Grove is unlike anything you've seen. The clearing is enormous, easily 100 paces across,
surrounded by oaks so old they must have been saplings when your great-great-grandparents were young. In the center stands a single massive oak, its trunk scarred with countless carvings, spirals, faces, symbols you don't yet know how to read. This is the speaking tree, where oaths are sworn and agreements sealed. Around the clearing's edge, temporary shelters have been erected, simple lean-tos of branches and hides, where different tribal delegations have claimed space. There are perhaps 50 people already present. You recognize the tribal markers, the Aedwi with their boar standards, the Sequani with wolf pelts, the Helvetii wearing their distinctive checkered cloaks. Warriors stand in loose groups, trying to look casual while clearly assessing each other's weapons and numbers. Chieftains sit on carved wooden stools, brought specially for this purpose, their gold torques gleaming. And scattered throughout, marked by their blue robes, are the Druids, at least a dozen of them, more than you've ever seen gathered together. The master leads you to the Aedwi section. You're introduced briefly to Chieftain Ambiorix, who you recognize from the roundhouse meeting. He nods at you with the same expression he might give a useful tool. Acknowledgement without particular interest. Other Druids approach to greet Master Diviciakos, their conversations conducted in low tones. You stand slightly behind and to the left, the traditional position for an attending student, trying to appear invisible while observing everything. A tall Druid with a scarred face. The test happens immediately. The scarred Druid, his name is Vercingetorix, you learn, recites a passage of law concerning cattle theft and compensation. It's complex, full of conditional clauses. If the theft occurs during daylight versus night. If the thief is caught immediately versus later. If the cattle are recovered intact versus injured. If the thief is a free man versus a slave. Each condition changes the compensation owed. The passage is perhaps 300 words, delivered in formal, archaic language that's deliberately difficult to follow. You listen with total focus, your mind organizing the information as it arrives. You're using the tree method. The main trunk is cattle theft. Each major branch is a different condition. Smaller branches are sub-conditions. Leaves are specific compensation amounts. By the time Vercingetorix finishes, the entire passage is structured in your mind as a living plant, each part connected to the others. Repeat it, he commands. You take a breath and begin in the same flat, emotionless tone Caturix taught you. Concerning the theft of cattle, the law states as follows. If cattle are taken during daylight hours and the thief is apprehended before the sun sets, compensation shall be 3 times the value of the animals, plus 1 young cow or bull of breeding age. You continue through every clause, every condition, every specific compensation. Your delivery is perfect. You don't stumble, don't hesitate, don't miss a single word. When you finish, there's a moment of silence. Then, the formal gathering begins at sunset. As the light fades, torches are lit around the clearing's perimeter, their flames creating a ring of light that separates this space from the dark forest beyond. You take your position, seated on the ground near the speaking tree, close enough to hear everything, but positioned so you're not part of the actual circle of participants. You have a wax tablet and stylus, not to write the proceedings, that would defeat the purpose of oral tradition, but to mark who speaks and in what order, a simple notation system to help organize your memory later. The 6 tribal chieftains form a loose circle around the speaking tree. Behind each stands their retinue,
druids, warriors, counselors. Master Divichiakos serves as the gathering's arbiter, the neutral party who manages the speaking order and ensures proper procedure. He stands with one hand on the speaking tree, a gesture that invokes its authority and the weight of all oaths sworn beneath its branches. "We gather under sacred oak," he begins, his voice carrying across the clearing. "In the old way, as our ancestors gathered before us. What is spoken here is witnessed by the gods, by the earth, and by memory that will not fade. Let those who speak truth. Let those who pledge keep their pledges. Let those who hear remember." The formal opening completed, he nods to Ambiorix. "The Aedwi may speak first." Ambiorix stands. The argument escalates quickly. Ambiorix produces witnesses. 3 farmers who claim they saw the raiders and recognize Sequani tribal markers on their shields. Casticus counters that anyone can paint symbols on a shield, and the Aedwi are manufacturing evidence to justify their own planned aggression. Back and forth, the accusations fly. Warriors on both sides begin fingering their weapons. The tension in the clearing is palpable. Master Divichiakos raises one hand. "Peace. This is sacred ground. No weapon may be drawn here." His voice isn't loud, but it carries absolute authority. The warriors settle, though they remain tense. Are there druids who can speak to this matter? An older druid from the Sequani delegation steps forward. His name, you learn, is Dumnorix. "I have traveled the contested border region. I found evidence of passage. A campsite recently used. The fire pattern and refuse suggests Helvetii raiders, not Sequani. They passed through our lands without permission, but they were not our warriors." This is new information. Immediately, the Helvetii chieftain rises in protest. "You accuse my people without evidence? I will not accept peace," Master Divichiakos repeats. "Dumnorix, can you provide evidence of your claim? I can describe the campsite in detail. I can produce artifacts left behind, and..." He pauses dramatically. "I can produce a confession from a captured raider who survived his wounds." This changes everything. You watch as the political calculus shifts around the circle. If the Helvetii are responsible, then the conflict between Aedwi and Sequani is manufactured, or rather, exploited. Someone wanted these 2 tribes fighting. You're learning that tribal politics is infinitely more complex than you imagined. This isn't just about stolen cattle. This is about manipulating larger conflicts for unknown purposes. The Helvetii chieftain looks genuinely shocked. "I authorized no raids." The gathering continues for hours. Dumnorix presents his evidence. Items found at the campsite, including a distinctive knife known to belong to a Helvetii warrior. And most damning, the testimony of the captured raider. The man is brought forward, wounded and bound, and he confirms the story. He was part of a small band hired by someone, he doesn't know who, to raid Aedwi lands while making it look like Sequani work. The goal was to start a war between the 2 tribes, but who hired them? The raider claims he never saw his employer's face, only received payment through an intermediary, who is now conveniently dead. The trail ends there. You watch as frustration ripples through the gathering. Someone orchestrated this, someone with resources and knowledge of tribal territories, but their identity remains hidden. Master Divichiakos lets the discussion run its course, then calls for focus. "The question of who hired the raiders must wait.
The immediate question is, what is to be done now? He looks at Ambiorix. The Aedui have been wronged, but not by the Sequani. The Sequani have been falsely accused. The Helvetii have had warriors act dishonorably, though their chieftain claims ignorance. Justice must be served. The negotiations that follow are intricate. The Helvetii must pay compensation to the Aedui for the damages, but at a reduced rate since their chieftain didn't authorize the raid. The Aedui must...
The gathering finally ends just before dawn. The eastern sky is beginning to lighten, turning from black to deep blue. You stand on shaking legs, your entire body stiff and sore from hours of sitting. Around you, the gathering disperses. Some tribal delegations leave immediately, eager to get distance before tensions potentially flare again. Others remain, conducting quiet side conversations, forming alliances or agreements separate from the main gathering. Master Divichiakos approaches you. "Come," is all he says. You follow him away from the clearing, back onto the forest path. Catcherix joins you, along with the 2 warrior escorts. No one speaks. You're grateful for the silence. Your mind is overfull, stuffed with words and images and political calculations. You need time to process, to sort, to solidify the memories before they begin to blur. The walk back is harder than the walk there. Your bare feet find every root and rock. Your legs threaten to give out. You focus on simply moving, one foot in front of the other, trusting the master to lead you home. The sun rises fully as you walk, warming your back, drying the night's damp. Birds sing their morning songs, oblivious to human politics. You reach your settlement around midday. You expect to be immediately tested on your memory of the gathering, but instead the master directs you to your sleeping quarters. "Rest," he says. "You'll be tested tomorrow." Your memory needs time to settle. You collapse onto your sleeping mat without even removing your cloak. Sleep takes you instantly, pulling you down into darkness where you dream of speaking trees and endless recitations, and bound raiders whose faces keep changing. When you wake, it's evening. You've slept for 6 hours straight and you're ravenously hungry. But before food comes the testing. The testing begins after you've eaten and washed. Master Divichiakos and 3 other senior druids gather in the teaching grove, not the sacred grove where morning lessons happen, but a smaller space used for examinations. You're nervous, but also strangely confident. You know you remember everything. The question is whether you can recall it in the correct order, with perfect accuracy, under pressure. Begin with the formal opening. Master Divichiakos instructs. You close your eyes, stepping into your mental palace. You're standing in the great grove again, night air on your skin, torch smoke in your nose. Master Divichiakos is speaking. "We gather under sacred oak, in the old way, as our ancestors gathered before us. What is spoken here is witnessed by the gods, by the earth, and by memory that will not fade. Let those who speak truth. Let those who pledge keep their pledges. Let those who hear remember." You recite it perfectly, word for word, inflection matching the master's original delivery. The druids nod. Continue. Ambiorix's opening statement. You step forward in your mental palace, turning to where Ambiorix stood in the circle. His words come back to you completely. 3 moons ago, raiders crossed our border from Sequani lands. They took cattle, burned 2 farms, and killed 4 of my people. The Sequani chieftain claims ignorance. I claim he is either lying or has lost control of his warriors. Either way, compensation is owed. Perfect. No hesitation, no errors. You continue through Casticus's response,
Dumnorix's intervention, the raiders' testimony, the final negotiations. You recite for over an hour, reproducing the entire gathering from memory. When you finish, there's silence. Then one of the senior druids, not your usual teachers, speaks. Exceptional. The child did well. There's that word again. Child. But this time it doesn't feel like an insult.
After the testing, after the formal acknowledgement of your success, you expect to return to normal lessons, but the master has other plans. You've seen how memory serves justice, he says as you walk together back toward the settlement. Now you must understand why we keep this knowledge in flesh rather than stone. He leads you to a part of the forest you've never visited before, a place where the ground rises into rocky hillside. Hidden among the rocks is a cave, its entrance narrow and easy to miss. The master produces a torch from his pack, lights it with flint and tinder, and gestures for you to follow him inside. The cave is shallow, no more than 20 paces deep, but its walls are covered in carvings. Ancient symbols, spirals, faces, animals, layer upon layer of them, some so old they're barely visible, others sharper and more recent. You stare in wonder. What is this place? A mistake, the master says flatly. 300 years ago, a group of druids believed we should preserve our most important knowledge in stone. They carved it here, thinking to create a permanent record that would survive even if all memory failed. He runs his hand over the carvings, his touch almost sorrowful. Do you know what happened? You shake your head, unable to look away from the spirals. A rival tribe discovered this cave. They studied the carvings. They learned our secrets, our strategies, our sacred knowledge. Then they used it against us. Within 10 years, that tribe had conquered 3 others and nearly destroyed the Druid order in this entire region. All because knowledge meant to be held in trusted memory was exposed in stone. He turns to face you fully. Stone keeps no secrets. Stone can be stolen. Stone can be read by enemies. Memory, held by trusted keepers, is the only true protection.
Exactly, Master Divichiakos confirms. Every druid trains a successor, passing knowledge person to person, with careful judgment about what that successor is ready to hold. When we die, our unique insights, the connections we've made, the patterns we've seen, die with us unless we've chosen to pass them on. This seems like loss, and in some ways it is. But it's also protection. He gestures around the cave. If all knowledge lives in every keeper, then no single loss is catastrophic. If each keeper specializes, becoming the master of certain areas while familiar with others, then the network of living memory is resilient. Lose one druid, and most knowledge survives in others. Lose one cave, and... He doesn't finish. The implication is clear. You're beginning to understand the genius and the tragedy of oral tradition. It's inefficient. Each generation must relearn everything, memory by laborious memory. It's vulnerable. A plague that kills many druids could wipe out vast swaths of knowledge. But it's also invisible, mobile, and impossible for enemies to exploit without infiltrating the Druid order itself. And given the Romans' habit of destroying sacred sites and persecuting local priests, invisibility is survival. How long until the Romans reach here?
you ask. The master is quiet for a long moment.
In my lifetime,
He finally says.
perhaps in yours.
They're systematic, patient, overwhelming. They build roads that make rapid troop movement possible. They construct forts that hold territory permanently. They turn conquered peoples into Romans, teaching them Latin, Roman law, Roman gods. It's not just conquest, it's transformation. And they see Druids as threats to that transformation. So we'll have to hide, you say softly.
We already are hiding,
He corrects.
in plain sight, in sacred groves that look like simple forests, in memories.
That evening, you sit with the other initiates at dinner. Barley porridge again, with onions, and a small piece of fish as a rare treat. The fish is probably in your honor, a small celebration of your successful witness work at the Great Grove. The other initiates ask questions, curious and envious. You answer carefully, describing the gathering's basic structure but avoiding details. Memory witness work is privileged information until you're given permission to share. Renos, the youngest, looks at you with something close to awe. You heard 6 chieftains argue? And you remember everything they said? Yes, you reply simply. All of it? Every single word? Every word. Vercingenos, the oldest initiate, is less impressed. Memory work is the easy part, he says, though there's no real malice in it. Understanding what you heard, that's harder. Politics is more complex than recitation. He's right, and you know it. You can replay the gathering word for word in your mind, but you're still not certain you understand all the currents beneath the surface. Who benefited from setting Edwi against Sequani? Who was the hidden employer of the Helvetii raiders? These questions nag at you. Did the masters say who hired the raiders? Vercingenos asks, probing. No one knows, you admit. The trail ended with a dead intermediary. Convenient, Vercingenos mutters. Someone powerful enough to cover their tracks. Someone who understands tribal politics well enough to know which conflict would cause maximum chaos. His eyes meet yours with sudden intensity. Could it be a druid? The thought hadn't occurred to you, and it hits like cold water. Could a druid be behind this? Someone with comprehensive knowledge of tribal relationships, with access to resources, with ability to move between tribes without suspicion? The possibility is disturbing. But before you can respond, Catarix appears in the doorway, summoning you to another lesson. Training never ends. The lesson with Caturix is different tonight. Instead of memory training, he takes you to the sacred grove and hands you a knife. Not your herb-cutting knife, but something larger, more serious. Iron, with a handle wrapped in leather, the blade the length of your forearm. You hold it awkwardly, unused to weapons. Druids are not warriors, Caturix says, but druids must sometimes defend themselves. The sacred groves will not always be safe. When the Romans come, they will target us first. Priests, knowledge keepers, anyone who might organize resistance. You need to know how to survive. He spends the next hour teaching you basic knife work, how to hold it properly, how to cut rather than stab, how to use your opponent's momentum against them. It's brutal, practical fighting. Nothing elegant or ritualized, just efficient ways to hurt someone who's trying to hurt you. Your hands tremble the first time you practice a throat-cutting motion, even though it's just air. Good, Caturix says when you hesitate. You should fear this. Taking life is not light work, even in defense. But fear that stops you from acting will get you killed. He demonstrates a disarming technique, moving faster than you expected.
The Romans train their soldiers professionally. You'll never beat them in open combat. Your advantage is surprise, knowledge of terrain, and willingness to run. Fight only when you must, then disappear. This is new material for you. Strategic violence, practiced in a sacred grove. The juxtaposition feels wrong, blasphemous even, but Cthulhu's is matter-of-fact about it. The grove is where we learn everything important. He explains life, death, memory, survival. Violence is part of the world. Pretending otherwise is foolishness. By the lesson's end, your hands are blistered from gripping the unfamiliar knife, and your mind is churning with yet another layer of dark knowledge.
Sleep is difficult that night. Your mind won't settle. Every time you close your eyes, you see different images. The carved cave, the gathered chieftains, the knife in your hand. The lessons are piling up faster than you can fully process them. You're learning that being a druid isn't the mystical, sacred calling you imagined as a child. It's brutal pragmatism disguised as spirituality. It's survival strategy masquerading as tradition. Around midnight, you give up on sleep and step outside. The settlement is quiet, except for dogs and the occasional snore from nearby roundhouses. The moon is nearly full, bright enough to walk by. Your feet take you toward the sacred grove automatically, your place of comfort, of learning, of belonging. You're not alone. Master Diviciakos sits at the base of the great oak, so still you almost don't see him. He doesn't turn when you approach, but he speaks. Can't sleep? Too much in my head, you admit, settling onto the ground near him but not too close. Master, are we going to lose? Against the Romans? The question has been building in you all day. Everything you've learned recently points to the same conclusion. Your people are preparing not for victory, but for survival, for holding knowledge through dark times, for becoming invisible until the threat passes. But what if the threat never passes? Yes, Master Diviciakos says, with the kind of honesty that takes your breath away. In every meaningful way, we will lose. They have armies, organization, writing, law that doesn't depend on memory. They build while we hide. They conquer while we adapt. But he finally turns to look at you, his pale eyes luminous in the moonlight. Losing a war is not the same as losing everything. Knowledge persists. Stories survive. We become myths, legends, whispers in the forest. And perhaps, centuries from now, someone will remember that we chose groves over temples for good reason. There's something else you should know, Master Diviciakos says after a long silence. The Great Grove Gathering, the dispute you witnessed. It's connected to Roman movements. The tribes that were nearly set against each other, they border the Roman-controlled territories. If they'd gone to war, they would have weakened each other precisely when unity is needed most. You sit up straighter, understanding dawning. Someone wanted them fighting. Someone who benefits from Celtic disunity, the Master confirms. The Romans have used this strategy before. In the southern territories, they found or created conflicts between tribes, then offered to arbitrate, to provide protection, to establish order. Once their soldiers are in place as peacekeepers, they never leave. They build a fort, then a road, then a town. Before anyone realizes the territory is Roman. So the hidden employer of the raiders, you begin, could be Roman, or could be a Celt working for Roman interests, knowingly or otherwise. The Master's voice is grim. This is what we're facing. Not just armies, but corruption of our own people, manipulation of our traditional conflicts for their strategic gain. And we're expected to remain neutral,
to hold law and memory without taking sides.
But we're not neutral, you protest. You warned Ambiorix about the iron weapons. You prevented a war. You're taking sides.
Yes, the Master admits. And if the Romans learn of it, I'll be marked for death. All of us will be. Druids are supposed to be above tribal politics. The moment we actively work against Rome, we become military targets rather than religious figures. But what choice do we have? Watch our people be manipulated into destroying each other? At some point, neutrality becomes complicity. You've never heard him speak so openly about these calculations. He's treating you as a colleague now, not just a student. The weight of that trust is almost too much to bear.
The Master stands, indicating the conversation is over.
You rise too, your legs stiff from sitting. But before you can leave, he places a hand on your shoulder, a rare gesture of physical contact. You did well at the Great Grove, he says. Your memory was perfect. But more than that, you held yourself with dignity under scrutiny. You represented us well. I wanted you to know that. The praise hits harder than you expected. You've been praised before for good recitation, for accurate memory. But this is different. This is acknowledgement of something deeper. Your character, your composure, your becoming. Your throat tightens with unexpected emotion. Thank you, Master. You manage. In 2 years, maybe 3, you'll finish your training. You'll become a full Druid with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. You'll have your own students, your own specializations. You'll be part of the unbroken chain of memory that goes back further than anyone can count. He pauses. And you'll have to make the same choices I'm making now. Neutrality or action, safety or risk. I can't tell you which to choose, but I can tell you this. Whatever you choose it consciously. Know why you're doing what you're doing. Too many people drift through life, reacting rather than deciding. Druids can't afford that luxury. He removes his hand from your shoulder. Go sleep. Tomorrow we return to regular lessons. Plant lore, I think. Something mundane and peaceful. You've had enough weight this week. You walk back to your roundhouse in a daze. Your mind is overfull, your emotions confused, your body exhausted. But underneath it all, you feel something unexpected. Pride. You're becoming what you're meant to become. Whatever that means in the coming dark times, you're on the path. You're learning. You're ready. Or at least, you're becoming ready. The next day brings the promised mundane lesson. You're grateful for it. Master Divachakos takes you and the other initiates into the forest to identify and harvest healing plants. It's autumn now, and many plants are dying back, their useful parts withering. You need to recognize them by stem and leaf pattern alone, without the flowers that make spring identification easier. This is yarrow, the Master says, indicating a dried stalk. You know its uses. Stops bleeding, you recite. Made into tea for fevers. The leaves crushed fresh can be applied to wounds, but the plant is protected. You must ask permission before taking and leave offerings. Good. And this? Valerian. The root is used for sleep drafts and calming. It must be harvested in the dark of the moon, when the plant's power is concentrated in the root rather than flower. The smell is terrible, but the effect is reliable. The lesson continues. Each plant a story, each use a fragment of accumulated knowledge. This is the Druid work you imagined as a child. Communion with the natural world. Understanding how to heal and help. It's peaceful in a way the recent lessons haven't been. There are no Romans in this knowledge, no political calculations, no dark futures, just plants and their properties, patterns repeated across generations, knowledge that will remain useful regardless of who rules these lands. By midday, you've collected a small bundle of dried plants for the teaching stores. Your hands smell of earth and herbs. Your mind feels cleaner, less cluttered with heavy thoughts. The other initiates are chattering about the coming winter, about the feast that will mark the dark season's beginning, about normal things. You join in cautiously, allowing yourself this brief return to simpler concerns. But that evening, everything changes again. A messenger arrives, wounded and urgent, with news that will reshape all your training. The messenger is Sequani, one of Chieftain Casticus's warriors. He's been wounded, a sword cut across his ribs that's been hastily bandaged but is bleeding through. He half collapses at the settlement's edge, calling for Druids. You're there when they bring him to the master, helping to support his weight as he's led to the healing house. Romans, the warrior gasps out. 3 days south. They've built a fort at the river crossing. Casticus sent me to warn the Edui, to warn everyone. They're not raiding. They're claiming territory. They have engineers, builders, hundreds of soldiers. The fort went up in 4 days. Master Diviciakos' face goes very still. How many soldiers? A full cohort, maybe more. And they're building a road north from the fort. Straight, flat, wide enough for wagons and troops, cutting through the forest like it's nothing. You help lay the warrior down so his wound can be tended. The master begins cleaning it with practiced efficiency, but his mind is clearly racing through implications. A Roman fort 3 days south, a road being built north. This isn't distant threat anymore. This is immediate presence. Did they see you? The master asks. Don't think so. I left at night, stayed off roads. But master, the warrior's face is gray with pain and fear. They're not like Celtic warriors. They move together, perfectly organized. Their armor is real metal, layered scales, nothing gets through. And they work. They don't rest, don't feast, don't posture. They just build, build, build. Fort road, like ants. And they're coming north. The master finishes binding the wound and gives the warrior something for pain. Then he turns to you and the other initiates who've gathered. Call the chieftains, all of them. Emergency council at the Great Grove in 2 days. Move. The emergency council gathers at the Great Grove faster than you thought possible. 6 tribes represented again. But this time there's no posturing, no preliminary disputes. Everyone knows why they're here. The wounded Sequani warrior is brought, still weak, but insisting on bearing witness. 2 other scouts have brought similar reports. The Romans are establishing a line of forts, creating a permanent presence that can't be ignored or wished away. Master Diviciakos stands at the speaking tree, and for the first time since you've known him, he looks old. Truly old. Not just aged, but burdened by time and knowledge. What we feared is here, he says simply. The Romans have crossed into our territories. They're not raiding. They're claiming, building, settling. We must decide our response. Chieftain Ambiorix speaks first. We fight. What else is there? Drive them out before they're established. Fight how? Asks the Helvetii chieftain. The scouts describe professional soldiers.
fortified positions, systematic organization. We're warriors, yes, but we fight as individuals, for glory and cattle and honor. They fight as a machine. A younger druid you don't know steps forward. Then we become a machine. Unite the tribes, pool our warriors, learn their tactics. That would take years, Master Divichiakos says quietly. And they have those years. They're patient. They'll wait for us to exhaust ourselves in raids against their forts, then counterattack when we're weakened. So we do nothing? Ambiorix's voice is rising. Let them build their roads through our lands? Let them change everything? I didn't say nothing, the master replies. I said we can't beat them in open conflict. But there are other ways to resist. Ways that use our advantages. Knowledge of the land, mobility. The fact that we don't need roads or forts or supply lines. Ways that make occupation costly for them.
The council debates for hours. Some chieftains want immediate war. Others urge caution, negotiation, even submission to avoid bloodshed. The Druids are divided too. Some arguing that preservation of knowledge requires avoiding conflict. Others insisting that knowledge without action is cowardice. You watch Master Divichiakos navigate the arguments, neither forcing agreement nor allowing total chaos. He's orchestrating something, you realize. Not consensus, that's impossible, but acceptable conflict, channeling tribal pride and fear into something that might be strategy. Finally, as the sun begins to set, a decision emerges, not unanimous, but supported by enough voices to matter. The tribes will not mount a direct assault on the Roman fort. That would be suicide. Instead, they'll make occupation expensive. Raids on supply lines, ambushes of small Roman patrols, destruction of the road being built, forcing them to rebuild constantly. Harassment, not confrontation, making the territory too costly to hold. It's not the glorious resistance some warriors wanted. It's not the complete avoidance some druids hoped for. It's compromise, practical and unglamorous. But it might work. Might keep the Romans from pushing further north. Might buy time for tribes to adapt, to learn, to survive. The Druids will support this strategy, Master Divichiakos announces. We will tend the wounded, record the actions, maintain the law, but we will not be neutral. We choose our people over Rome. The admission is public, formal, irrevocable. Every Druid present has now declared themselves enemies of Rome, including, by association, you. The council ends with oath-taking at the speaking tree, each chieftain swearing to the agreed strategy. You record every oath, knowing that these words may be all that's remembered when the speakers are dead. That's what Druids do, after all. We remember. We witness. We carry forward what must not be lost. You return to your settlement exhausted beyond anything you've experienced. The testing after the first Great Grove gathering was difficult, but this is worse. You're not just tired, you're traumatized. You've witnessed your people commit to resisting Rome, knowing how that story likely ends. You've heard Master Divichiakos publicly declare Druids as enemies of the Empire. You've recorded oaths that may be death sentences for everyone who spoke them. That night, you dream of roads, endless Roman roads, straight as spear shafts, cutting through forests and hills and sacred groves. In the dream, you're running on one of these roads, trying to escape, but the road goes on forever, and there are soldiers behind you, their armor clanking in perfect rhythm. You wake, gasping, covered in sweat, and find that you're not alone.
Brenos is awake too, sitting up in his sleeping area, his face pale in the moonlight streaming through the smoke hole.
I heard about the council,
He whispers.
the others told me.
Is it true? Are we really going to fight Rome? You nod, not trusting your voice. Are we going to die? His voice is small, frightened. A child asking an older sibling a question that has no good answer. I don't know, you say honestly. Maybe. Probably. Eventually. You think about Master Diviciakos' words about losing in every meaningful way but preserving knowledge. But maybe we'll survive too. Maybe we'll adapt. Maybe we'll become something new. Brenos doesn't look comforted. I don't want to die, he says simply. I'm only 13. I haven't even finished my basic training. You cross the space between your sleeping areas and sit beside him. You're not good at comfort. Druids aren't trained for it. But you try. Then we'll make sure you finish your training, you say. We'll remember everything. That's what we do. The following weeks bring a new kind of training. Master Diviciakos and the other senior druids begin teaching practical survival skills that were never part of the traditional curriculum. How to move silently through forest, how to find or create shelter quickly, how to identify Roman patrols by their sounds and movements, how to treat wounds in the field without proper supplies, how to hide, flee, and when necessary, how to kill efficiently. You practice these skills alongside your regular memorization work. By day, you recite genealogies and laws. By evening, you learn to set snares, to move without snapping branches, to dig a sleeping hollow that keeps you warm and hidden. The juxtaposition is surreal. Sacred knowledge and guerrilla tactics, taught by the same teachers in the same groves. One afternoon, Chaturix takes you alone to a clearing and gives you a different kind of test. Romans are coming up that path, he says, pointing. In reality, they'd be a patrol of 6 to 10 men, fully armed, moving in formation. You're alone, unarmed except for your herb knife. What do? You study the terrain. The path is narrow, forest thick on both sides. I hide, you say. Let them pass. Fighting would be suicide. Good. But what if you're carrying important information that must reach the settlement? You can't afford the time to wait them out. You look again, thinking harder. The forest is denser to the east. I'd move away from the path, perpendicular, slowly and quietly, putting distance between myself and their likely route. If they have trackers, I'd walk in the stream bed for a distance to break the scent trail, then continue east until I can circle back north. Chaturix nods approval. You're learning to think like prey. Good. That's what keeps you alive when you're outmatched. Pride kills warriors. Caution keeps druids breathing. Winter arrives early and hard. The first snow falls in the month when leaves should still be turning, catching everyone unprepared. Food becomes scarce. The harvest was poor, and warriors are eating more as they train and patrol. You're always hungry now, a gnawing emptiness that never quite goes away. The cold is worse. Your single cloak is inadequate, and there's no spare fabric for another. You learn to sleep curled tight, sharing body heat with the other initiates, all pride abandoned in favor of survival. The Romans, apparently, don't care about winter. Scouts report that their fort remains active, the road construction continuing despite the snow. They have supplies, organization, heated buildings. The Celtic response, raids on supply lines, ambushes of patrols, becomes harder in winter. Snow means tracks that can be followed. Cold means warriors can't stay out overnight without risk of freezing. The resistance that seemed promising in autumn looks much harder in winter's reality. You continue your training, though lessons move indoors more often. The roundhouse becomes a classroom, initiates huddled around the central fire as you recite and memorize. But there's a grimness to it now. You're not learning for the joy of knowledge.
You're learning because this knowledge might be all that survives. Every verse memorized is a small victory against oblivion. Every law preserved is resistance against Roman order erasing your own. One evening, Master Divichiakos calls you aside after lessons. "You've done well this year," he says quietly. "Better than I expected when you first served as memory witness. You're ready for deeper knowledge now. Tomorrow, you'll begin learning the sacred mysteries, the knowledge that only full Druids carry. Normally, this would wait until your 20th year, but normal times are over." You understand what he's not saying. He's teaching you now because he might not survive to teach you later.
The sacred mysteries are not what you expected. You thought they'd be dramatic revelations, cosmic secrets, powerful rituals. Instead, they're subtler and stranger. Master Divichiakos teaches you the deep patterns, how to read not just individual events, but the larger currents of time and change, how to see the cycles that govern rise and fall of peoples, the patterns that repeat across generations, the underlying structures that shape history. The Romans will win, he tells you in one late-night session, just the two of you in the teaching grove despite the cold. Not because they're better warriors, they're not individually. Not because their gods are more powerful, they're not, in any way that matters. They'll win because they understand systems. They build roads that enable communication and commerce. They create laws that can be applied consistently across vast territories. They train soldiers who can be replaced, whose individual death doesn't disrupt the formation. They've created something larger than any one person, any one tribe. And we... He pauses, breath misting in the cold air. We are brilliant individuals. Our druids each master vast knowledge. Our warriors fight with courage and skill. Our craftspeople create works of beauty. But we don't build systems. We build relationships, traditions, personal bonds. That's our strength and our fatal weakness against Rome. You listen, recording this in your memory alongside more traditional teachings. This is the kind of knowledge that would be heresy to speak openly. Admitting defeat before the war is really joined. But it's also wisdom. The clear-eyed assessment that lets you plan for what comes after defeat. So what do? You ask. We preserve. We adapt. We hide what must not be lost in places they won't look. In stories that seem like entertainment. In songs. In memories. We become invisible. And we wait. Empires rise and fall. Rome will fall eventually. And when it does, who will remember what came before? Spring comes late but fierce. The snow melting almost overnight into floods that make rivers impassable and roads into mud. The Romans, you learn from scouts, have stopped road construction temporarily. Even their organization can't beat the spring floods. It gives your people a breathing space, a few months to prepare, to train, to hope. You're 17 now, nearly finished with your formal training. In normal times, you'd have 3 more years before becoming a full Druid. But as Master Divichiakos said, normal times are over. You've learned nearly everything. The laws, the genealogies, the histories, the plant lore, the sacred mysteries. You can serve as memory witness, as healer, as counselor. You've learned to fight when necessary and hide when possible. You've learned to think in systems and patterns, to see the long game, In early summer, Master Divishiakos calls a small gathering. Just you, Vercingenos, and 2 other advanced students. You're ready, he says simply. I'm advancing all of you to full Druid status, 2 years early. We need more fully trained keepers of knowledge, not more students. The ceremony will be tomorrow at dawn. You should feel joy. This is what you've worked toward for 7 years. But instead, you feel the weight of it. You're being promoted early because Druids are dying, because the need is urgent, because there may not be time for the proper progression. That night, you don't sleep. You walk to the sacred grove alone and sit under the great oak. You think about the child you were at 10, beginning this training with dreams of mystical power and honored status. You think about who you've become at 17. Harder, more practical, less innocent. You've learned that Druids aren't mystical shamans, but pragmatic keepers of cultural memory. You've learned that sacred groves are strategic choices, not spiritual ones. You've learned that your calling is survival, not glory. The ceremony is simple. The 4 of you stand before a gathering of senior Druids at dawn in the sacred grove. Master Divishiakos speaks the words of elevation, marking you as full members of the order. You recite the Druid's oath, to preserve knowledge, to serve justice, to maintain balance between the seen and unseen worlds. You receive your blue robe, the mark of your status, and a gold ring engraved with spirals that marks you as a keeper of sacred knowledge. It's over in less than an hour. No grand ritual, no mysterious revelations, just words, acknowledgement, and the weight of responsibility settling onto your shoulders like a physical thing. You are a Druid now. You are 17 years old, and you carry the history and law and lore of your people in your mind. You are a target for Rome, and a treasure for your tribe. You are what you have trained to become. After the ceremony, the senior Druids disperse to their various duties. Only Master Divishiakos remains. He looks at you, not as student, but as colleague now, and speaks. The Romans are moving again. The spring floods have receded. They'll push north within weeks. When they come, many of us will flee deeper into the forests, establishing hidden groves where knowledge can be preserved. Some will stay, blending into settlements, becoming invisible. Some will actively resist. You must choose your path. You've known this moment was coming. You've been preparing for it, but still the choice feels impossible. Flee and preserve? Stay and risk capture? Fight and likely die? What will you do, Master? You ask. He looks toward the south, toward where the Romans build their roads and forts. I will stay. Someone must bear witness to what happens here. Someone must remember. And in that moment, you know your choice. You will stay too.
And so you stand, 17 years old, wearing the blue robes of a Druid, carrying the memories of your people in your mind. The Romans are coming. Your world will change beyond recognition, but you've chosen to remember. You've chosen to witness. You've chosen to stay in the sacred groves rather than flee to stone temples that can be destroyed. Centuries from now, when people wonder why the ancient Celts kept no written records, why they built no stone temples, why they seemed to vanish into legend and mist, you'll understand. They didn't vanish. They adapted. They survived by becoming invisible, by trusting memory over monuments, by choosing groves over grandeur. The wisdom was always in the trees, never in the stone. The sacred was always in the living, never in the permanent. And you, witness to the end of one age and the beginning of another, will carry that truth forward into darkness, trusting that memory, like seeds, will survive the winter and bloom again when spring returns. Sleep now, knowing that what matters most isn't carved in stone, but carried in hearts, passed voice to voice, generation to generation, whispered in groves that look like simple forests, but hold the secrets of 1,000 years.